So, everyone, thank you so much for joining us today for Gamification in Action. True to our title, my colleagues, Danny Silver and Esteban Cascante, will be walking you through a practice framework. And then they'll delve into some use cases and examples, and then wrap up by comparing them against the framework. We will leave some time for Q&A at the end, but please continue to make noise in the chat throughout the session today. If something resonates with you or inspires curiosity, we will go back over and take a look at your questions and make sure we address those. A quick word about SweetRush for those of you who may be newer to us. We were founded in 2001 and have been a strong player in the L&D industry for the past 25 years. Just this January, we joined the NIIT family of world-class learning services. Some of the things that we love to do are strategic consulting to help clients positively impact their business through L&D, creating engaging, effective, and innovative custom learning solutions that leverage exciting technologies like virtual and augmented reality, Gen AI, and yes, gamification. We also have an extensive network of high-performing L&D professionals and subject matter experts, and we love sharing that wealth through our talent solutions services. Last but not least, it has been an honor to receive numerous industry awards for the solutions we develop with our amazing client partners. Quick PSA, if you are headed to Los Angeles next month for ATD, please make sure to stop by and say hello to our team. We'll be at booth 2047, and we would love to see you there and hear about what you're tackling this year. We're especially excited about an industry insights session on Wednesday morning with our own Carla Torgerson and John Cleve. They will be sharing some very practical, human-centered ways to use generative AI and microlearning to support your people. We would love to have you in the room for that conversation. And now, without further ado, I'll hand things over to Danny and Esteban.
All right. Thank you for that introduction. Hello, everybody. I am Esteban, and I have worked on the education field for more than 20 years. And I was surprised and a little bit excited, to be honest, that gamification was trending again. Because first, I'm a gamer, and I love to integrate gamified elements into trainings. Also, I lead the the XR team, and in the XR team, we believe that we never stopped doing gamification, even if we weren't kind of calling it like that. Uh, so I started thinking about gamification in 2026, and to be honest, I didn't know exactly what that meant. So I started having conversations with the team, and we decided that it could be a really good exercise to go over the projects that we have created uh, in the past, over the years, and extract the good practices of gamification. Because again, we never stopped doing it. So we went through the process, and that led us to what we are showing you today. Something important is that throughout this process of going back and checking the projects that might look a little bit old, but they were good ideas, um, we wanted to find a way of defining what a good example of gamification is, and some way to classify it and understand why this is a good example. And I was, searching for a way of doing that in the web, and I found the Octalysis framework that Danny actually is going to explain in a moment. And we used this framework to ensure that we are selecting examples that allows the users to move from just fun experiences to actually functional psychological triggers. So these are the examples that we are sharing with you today.
All right. So as we went down this trip down memory lane, we analyzed our most successful and impactful projects, and we realized that the common thread was not a specific technology or a certain design style, but rather it went much deeper than that. So the success of some of these experiences that we're going to showcase today is really rooted in how effectively they pull on the specific levers of human technology, psychology rather. So the Octalysis framework, as Esteban mentioned, allows us to move past simple features like basic leaderboards or points and to look at the 8 core drives that actually compel a person to take action. So think of Octalysis as our motivation map. It provides a structured way to design for function. And to help you apply this framework to your own work, we will be providing a handout at the end of the webinar that really summarizes these concepts and serves as a practical guide for your next gamification project. So with that, let's take a closer look at the Octalysis framework here. And really, it's an octagon that is organized into these various different components. And it helps us to really visualize human motivation. So looking at the 8 drives at a high level, the first one is epic meaning. This is the drive where a person believes they are part of something larger than themselves. A calling, for example, to provide better care or to solve a major problem. The next one, accomplishment. This is our internal drive to make progress, to develop skills, and eventually achieve mastery over a difficult challenge. Empowerment is about agency, so it's the drive where learners are engaged in a creative process of trial and error and seeing the immediate results of their own unique choices. Ownership is the desire to improve or protect what we feel belongs to us. In learning, this often translates to owning a new set of skills or building a personal library of knowledge. Social influence is the drive that is powered by our connections to others. So this includes mentorship, peer-to-peer collaboration, and even healthy competition. Scarcity is the motivation to act because an opportunity is limited. It creates focus by making a goal feel exclusive or maybe time sensitive. Number 7 is unpredictability. So this is our innate desire to discover what happens next. It keeps the learner engaged by using mystery and narrative to pull them through the experience. And finally, number 8 is loss and avoidance. This is the drive to prevent something negative from happening. In safety or crisis training, for example, this is really powerful for ensuring that safety protocols are followed to avoid a simulated disaster. So to use this framework effectively, we also need to look at how these 8 drives fall into 4 distinct categories. This helps us design the vibe, if you will, of the experience based on the specific behavior that we want to change. So if you look here on screen, white hat, which is the top half of the diagram here, these are our positive motivators: meaning, accomplishment, empowerment. These drives make learners feel powerful, satisfied, and in control. We use these to build long-term engagement and a sense of professional purpose. When we look at the bottom half of the diagram, this is black hat. So on the flip side, these triggers are scarcity, unpredictability, loss and avoidance. They aren't necessarily negative, but they are high pressure. They create immediate urgency and intense focus. So in a simulation, this allows us to use safe pressure to mirror the stakes of the real world. Then if you look at the left-hand side of the diagram, this represents our logical extrinsic drives. These are centered on ownership and development. This is the desire for progress, the gathering of skills, and the goal-oriented side of learning, where the reward is the result. And then the right-hand side represents our creative and intrinsic drives, like social influence and curiosity. These are activities that are their own reward. So when a learner is in this category, they aren't playing for a prize. They are engaged because the activity itself is social and creatively fulfilling. So our process never starts with fun or engagement as a vague goal. We start with the performance gap and the specific behavior change required by the business. If we don't understand the real-world friction that your learners are facing, no amount of gamification will solve that problem. Once we define the goal, we apply the Octalysis lens. We map those 8 core drives to the specific psychological needs of your audience. A surgeon, a warehouse floor worker, and a corporate manager, they'll all have very different motivational triggers, and we identify exactly which ones will move the needle for your specific learners. Next, we choose the vibe of the experience. We decide whether the goal requires white hat motivators to provide that long-term inspiration and professional meaning, or if it requires black hat triggers to create the immediate urgency and focus needed for safety critical tasks. It's about choosing the right tool for the right experience. And finally, we ensure that the mechanics align with proven pedagogical models. The psychology and the game mechanics are never there just for entertainment. They're woven into the instructional design to ensure that the learning is durable, repeatable, and ready to be taken from theory to practice. And so with that foundation in place, let's see these principles in action. We'll walk through a selection of our previous work to examine how the Octalysis framework was used to architect each experience and really move learners from theory to practice. And with that, I'll hand back over to Esteban to take us through our first case study.
All right, amazing. Thank you, Danny. All right, we are going to kick it off with a project that I really like because it allows the physicians to practice empathy in end-of-life conversations. Our client was a leading organization for primary care for physicians, and they were facing an issue that we call the application gap. They have all the excellent medical protocols for hospice care, but they only had a really text-heavy e-learning that couldn't prepare doctors for the emotional weight of having this type of real-world end-of-life conversations. So we launched this project, I believe, that around 2 years ago as a pilot to prove that AI-driven conversations could bridge that gap. The result is a simulation where physicians practice navigating through these delicate conversations in 3 different scenarios that represent the progression of a patient with terminal cancer and the weight that creates for the families and the caregivers. By using WebXR and natural language models, we enable the users to use their own words, and then we provided feedback based on the pre-approved framework of our client. This transformed a passive learning event into authentic practice, allowing physicians to calibrate their communication style in a safe environment. Now, if we take this experience and we analyze it against the framework, we can start with the why. In this case, the why is epic meaning. We are not using any points. We are not using badges to motivate the physicians. We are tapping into their calling to provide the best possible care for a patient in a vulnerable state. Because of that focus on meaning, the experience is naturally white hat. It is not about the stress or the pressure. It's about long-term professional fulfillment and building the confidence to handle these conversations correctly. To deliver that feeling, the primary dimension is narrative. The story of the engine, it is a deeply personal interaction where the game mechanics are just part of the experience in the dialogue itself, rather than appearing as menus, or icons, or other elements. And the how, in this case, is provided by natural language AI. Instead of picking things from a multiple choice answer, physicians use their own words to respond to the questions of the patient and even the family. And this is critical because it forces the brain to actually perform the empathy rather than just recognizing the correct answer on the screen. And finally, the stakes in a safety simulation, the consequence might be that there is a fire if you don't perform correctly. But in this case, it's just loss of rapport and trust. If the physician is too cynical or even dismissive, they seem how the patient withdraws emotionally. And that immediate visceral feedback is what bridges the gap between theory and application. And we believe this is what makes the lesson stick.
In this next experience, we move away from the white hat empathy of hospice care, which was the example that Esteban just presented, into a more high pressure world of crisis management. This is a de-escalation simulation that follows several intense hospital scenarios, ranging from a patient becoming agitated to family members getting upset. As you can imagine, in a hospital setting, emotions are high, and the reality for doctors and nursing staff is that situations can often turn violent. Our goal was to prepare them for that friction. We're going to play a short video clip from the project, and I'll offer a quick caveat. There is some raw language here. We intentionally kept the dialogue unpolished because we wanted this to feel authentic to the lived experience of the staff. And as you watch, look for how the patient reacts to the user's choices. Unlike a traditional quiz, if the user fails to navigate the conversation milestones correctly, the patient's aggression increases, culminating in a violent outburst, which you'll see at the end. Another caveat to share here is that this project is actually 9 years old. I was just talking about this with the team earlier. So though it's one of our older one, and you'll notice some of the avatar styles and some other design choices were within the constraints of the technologies that were available to us at the time. But it is still such a powerful example, and we just couldn't have a webinar on gamification without showing this simulation. So with that, we can play the video.
Oh, damn it, you took long enough. What, you don't care if I was in here dying? Caring hospital, my ass. I've asked that nurse 5 damn times to unhook me from this thing. Come take this off.
I see you are pulling at the IV and cursing. Are you feeling angry?
Well, hell yes, I'm upset. Take this damn IV out of me so I can get out of this stupid room.
What do you want?
What do I want? I want a cigarette. You've had me locked up here for days and no one will let me smoke.
What have you tried so far?
Everything. Asking you people to let me out to smoke. Trying to take this damn needle out.
So that has not worked for you?
Well, not well. You've either ignored or straight up said no. What the hell do you want me to do?
That sounds frustrating. Sorry about that.
Why won't you just help me? Is it because you hate yourself and your shitty job? I need something now.
You haven't been asking. You have been yelling.
Great. So I'll just sit here waiting like before.
All right, so what you just saw, it's not just about the words that the physician used, it's also about their body language. So in virtual reality, we're not only tracking their words, but we're tracking where they're standing. So you might have noticed a requirement there on the right-hand side of the screen for a specific 90-degree defensive posture and standing a distance away from the patient that might become aggressive. So by layering physical movement with verbal choices, we move the learning from the brain into the body in a way, ensuring that these actions become muscle memory. So this is one of our older experiences, as I mentioned, and while you notice the multiple choice prompts on the screen, we can now build these scenarios with natural language AI, where learners can respond freely and have a fluid, unscripted conversation with the avatar. But even in this earlier version, we're creating this high stakes environment where the learner is hyper-focused on the outcome. It ensures the gravity of a real-world conflict is felt and respected within the safety of a simulation. So to understand why that visceral reaction is so effective for moving from theory to practice, Let's look at the specific mechanics as mapped against the Octalysis framework. So here we lead with loss and avoidance. The why is simple. The learner is motivated by the immediate desire to prevent a negative outcome, which in this case is stopping that physical aggression that we just saw. So it creates a black hat environment defined by urgency. Because de-escalation is a high pressure skill, we use the sense of stress to mirror reality. The mechanics are tied directly to the environment and the learner's individual choices. So success depends entirely on the user's presence and their decisions. The how is driven by gesture, voice, and gaze. So using natural body language and vocal commands, this ensures the way that you learn is exactly how you'll act during an actual clinical encounter. And then finally, the stakes are physical aggression here. So that safe failure of having an object thrown at you is far more memorable than a text-based correction. By triggering a genuine stress response in virtual reality, the experience creates a sort of experiential memory, which is what we hope makes the lesson stick. And then, as I mentioned, with all of these case studies in mind, it's important to note that the avatars that we have showcased in some of these older examples reflect the technology available to us at the time that they were built. Since then, avatar technology has just evolved exponentially. So we've moved far beyond these earlier examples and are now able to create experiences with significantly higher fidelity 3D assets or even hyper-realistic real-time animated avatars. Okay, so moving on to the next example here. In industrial environments, the cost of a mistake during training can be catastrophic. Our client needed a way for teams to practice complex procedures, tasks that are too dangerous or too expensive to replicate in the real world, without any actual risk to people or equipment. We built a multiplayer VR environment where teams can work together in a shared digital twin of the facility. This isn't just a solo exercise, it's a social, high fidelity simulation where precision and communication are the only way to succeed. What makes this truly effective is that it is a safe to fail environment, but it doesn't necessarily feel safe. If a team misses a safety step or handles equipment incorrectly, they don't just see a try again screen, they witness the visceral consequences, like a warehouse fire or an equipment failure, in a way that triggers a real emotional response. By allowing learners to experience the worst case scenario virtually, we're able to bridge that gap between knowledge and action. So our hope is that they return to the floor with more than just knowledge. They return with a lived experience of why the safety protocol exists, leading to a significant reduction in real-world errors. So walking through the specific psychological mechanics that drive this experience, we lean on, again, loss and avoidance here. The motivation is simple, preventing a disaster. The learner isn't working for points, they're working to protect the facility and their teammates from a simulated catastrophe. This is a black hat design. We use the pressure of a potential accident to create immediate focus. This healthy sense of urgency ensures that the learner treats the virtual procedure with the same gravity as they would in the field. The mechanics are baked into the environment itself. So your score, so to speak, is the physical integrity of the warehouse and, most importantly, the safety of your team. Success is defined by a zero harm outcome. If the environment remains intact and every team member is out of harm's way, then the mission is accomplished. The how is driven by a full body engagement through gesture and voice. Because this is a multiplayer experience, vocal coordination is your primary tool for safety. But we take it a step further, so you'll notice that learners physically manipulate the environment, whether it's precisely turning a valve to a very specific degree or bending down to unhook a latch. These are not just abstract point and click, they are the exact motor skills required in the field. So this ensures that the muscle memory developed in the simulation translates directly to the physical reality of the job. And finally, by visualizing the hazard, by visualizing the outcome, we provide learners with that firsthand awareness of the stakes, making sure that they respect the safety protocols from the moment that they arrive on site. Back to Esteban for public speaking.
Thank you, Danny. All right. As you know, public speaking is a skill that requires consistent hands-on application. But practicing in front of a live audience can be overwhelming for a beginner. So our client needed a way for learners to refine their technique and get real-time feedback without the paralyzing pressure of a living room. So we designed this WebXR simulation that lets the learner practice in a controlled environment. This can be taken on a regular desktop computer, but also it can be taken in a VR headset for a more immersive experience in case you have one. So the users can customize the environment. They can switch from a conference room to a large auditorium and can even set the audience attitude. They can choose between a calm, attentive crowd or a restless, distracted one that is more challenging. As they speak, the system provides live feedback on the pace, tone, pitch, and even the eye contact to ensure that the skill actually sticks. The experience becomes harder and harder, and eventually, the timers and the feedback fade away, forcing the learner to rely on their own developed instincts. And at the end, we provide users with the information that allows them to self-evaluate according to their own objectives. And this transforms a subjective feeling of anxiety into a visible path uh, for a better performance. And again, let's analyze the experience against the framework. In this case, we lean on development as the primary octalysis drive. The why here is the tangible sense of improvement. By tracking their own progress from that first speech to the final one, learners are motivated by their own growing mastery. This is a white hat experience because it's focused on empowering, and by practicing in a safe to fail environment, we allow the learners to focus on growth and professional development. The context is social, even though the audience is virtual. The brain responds to that restless or that calm crowd as they were real. The social immersion is what makes the rehearsal feels authentic. The how is all about the voice and gaze. The system monitors how the user is projecting the voice and where they are looking at, ensuring that they are truly engaging with the room rather than just reading a script. Finally, the consequence is the audience disengagement. If the speaker doesn't maintain their pace or their tone, they could see the audience become more restless. And the immediate feedback is a powerful teacher motivating the learner to adjust their performance in real time.
All right.
And now back to Danny.
Yes, sorry, took me a minute there to unmute. So in this next example here, we partnered with a global leader in professional services to build a 12-week virtual learning journey for their managers. The goal was to help them better connect with their team members, but we knew that standard training alone would not bridge the gap between learning a concept and actually applying it. So this digital card game was designed as a key social component of a larger blended program that included instructor-led sessions and e-learning. It provided a dedicated space where managers could gather in small pods to move from theory to practice in a way that felt time efficient and learner driven. The game is built to be self-sustaining, so each pod appoints its own leader so that an expert facilitator is not required to move the conversation forward. Then, using randomized card combinations, managers navigate team descriptions and work styles, ensuring that no two scenarios or conversations are ever the same. By providing clear instructions and discussion prompts, the technology handles the logistics, allowing managers to focus entirely on the strategic debate. It acts as a bridge between their formal training and the real-world complexities of leading a team. The result is a scalable, engaging forum for both learning and collegial problem solving. It proves that social learning is most effective when it is integrated into a broader learner journey, giving learners a safe space to test ideas with peers. So looking at the mechanics that make this social component so effective within this blended model, here we lead with social influence. The why behind this experience is the peer-to-peer connection. Managers are motivated by the discussion, the collaboration, and the shared responsibility of leading their pod through the challenges. This is a white hat design. It's built on empowerment and teamwork. It leaves the learner feeling more connected to their colleagues and gives them a positive, collaborative environment to test new management styles. The context here, of course, is social. So the game provides the structure, but the real learning happens in the debate. Because the cards are randomized, the experience feels personal and fresh every time learners play. The how here is choice and collaboration. So while they are interacting with digital cards, the true modality is the group dialogue. The technology is simply the catalyst that prompts that human interaction. And finally, the consequence is peer feedback. If a strategy doesn't work, the feedback comes from the group's own analysis. That social accountability is a far more effective teacher for leadership than any automated score or grade.
All right. The next example was part of a curriculum to learn how to speak Chinese. And what we did was to create an experience where we have a 3D Chinese market, a marketplace. And instead of a static room, the users are dropped into an interactive setting where they're encouraged to explore and engage with the world around them. The learning is active. The user needs to find interactive objects. And once they do, they have to pronounce its name or their name. We use an integrated speech recognition system to evaluate that their pronunciation is good, and we provide feedback in real time. If a pronunciation isn't quite right, the system provides a clear path to improvement. We display an audio from a native person, a native recording, so they can hear the correct pronunciation. And since we record their voice when they are trying, they can compare what they say with the native recording side by side. This comparison allows them to hear the difference between both before they try again. The experience is designed also to learn as the user grows. It has 3 levels, and we move from identifying single words to forming full sentences. And as the user's skills increase, actually the guided assistance gradually fades away, forcing them to rely on what they have learned throughout the course. If we analyze this, we lead in ownership. This is a scavenger hunt that makes the vocabulary feel like something the user is earning and collecting, which is a great way to keep people engaged with a difficult subject. This is a white hat experience. It is built on the positive feeling of discovery and accomplishment, and the goal is to make the learner feel empowered as they unlock new parts of the language. The context is psychological because the words are tied to physical objects in the environment. The learning builds a stronger mental association. We aren't just learning a word, we are learning its place in the world. The how is voice and choice. By combining the physical exploration with spoken practice, we ensure that the learner is fully participating in the process rather than just clicking throughout the menu. And finally, the consequence is gentle correction. Mistakes are handled through playback and the comparison tool. And this removes the fear of being wrong and turns every error into a quick, low pressure coaching moment.
So we just walked through several diverse examples from high-stakes medical de-escalation to global leadership development. While the industries and the technologies vary, the underlying success of each project came down to a deliberate transition. So moving from psychological theory into functional architecture. It's one thing to understand that a learner needs social influence or accomplishment. It's another to build the specific mechanics that make those things to make those feelings a reality. This is where we move from the why to the how. So to close, I want to share a specific design checklist that we use to ensure that our projects deliver on their goals. These are the core principles that turn a creative concept into a reliable, high-performing learning game. So we've distilled our process into a simple 4-point checklist that you can apply to any design. First, you need to define the behavioral goal, of course. The architecture of any project must start with the end in mind. We don't just look at the learning objectives, we identify the specific behavioral change required. What is the one thing the learner needs to do differently after this experience? This becomes the North Star for any design choice that you make. Then we can identify the human drivers. So once the goal is set, map the experience to the Octalysis framework. Identify which of the 8 core drives will be the most effective for your specific audience, and then make that critical vibe decision, determining whether the goal requires the long-term inspiration of white hat drives or the immediate high-pressure focus of black hat triggers. This design decision ensures that the motivational tone matches the stakes of the real-world task. Next, make sure to design a seamless interface. Technology should never be a barrier to the experience. Focus on creating an interface that feels natural and intuitive, whether it's using hand gestures in virtual reality or a simple card-based interaction for managers. The goal is to remove the friction between the learner and the content so that they can focus entirely on the practice. Finally, move beyond static correct, incorrect prompts and build adaptive feedback loops. These are real-time contextual reactions, like an avatar's tone of voice changing or a visual hazard appearing. This allows the learner to self-correct in the moment, which is the most effective way to turn theory into an actual skill. So we hope this checklist helps structure your thinking as you begin to architect your next experience. Our goal really through this webinar was to share the logic behind our work so that you can apply it to yours. And we would love to hear about all the innovative ways that you're using some of these principles to bridge the gap from theory to practice in your own organizations. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Tiffany.
Thank you so much for that deep dive, Danny and Esteban. I was seeing some love in the chat. We would love folks who are joining us in the audience today to share your questions. Please go ahead and put those in chat. We would love to get to those. And in the meantime, I will pop Danny's and Esteban's LinkedIn into the chat as well. Please do connect with them. We would love to continue this conversation and answer any questions that may come up. There they are in chat.
Perfect. And while you're adding your questions into chat, I'll share that it's so interesting, as Esteban shared in the beginning of the webinar, to see gamification trending again. And as a solution architect, my role is to connect with clients in the early phases of the conversation and to hear their needs and their objectives. And so I get to hear from clients every day and get to hear some of those, needs, goals, trends. And so gamification is just fascinating to me. And so when we went to look back at the Octalysis framework and how it applies to some of these experiences, I just found it really interesting that it applies to so many different use cases, from soft skills, you saw those conversation simulations, all the way through to technical skills and, safety simulations and so forth. So really, these principles apply across the board. So any use case in which you have an application objective, you've got that foundational knowledge down, but now you need something to get people practicing and putting those skills to the test. That's when these principles become so important. So I see a few questions coming in here. Question concerning the AI-driven response. How does SweetRush handle the token cost at scale across all these games? And I see Esteban coming off mute. It's the perfect question for him. I'm going to throw that to you.
Well, first, for us, security is the most important thing when we have these discussions with our clients. So there are different techniques that we use, but normally, depending on the client, we create a specific server that is, in most cases, an Amazon Bedrock server, meaning that it is a protected server where only a specific instance of the AI lives for that specific line without sharing information to the main model or with interacting with information of any other client. So this is first. When we do that, since we are creating a specific instance of the AI for this specific line, then we can control the cost of the tokens for that specific client. So there are different ways how we handle this. Sometimes we add some budget at the beginning with the projection of the cost throughout the whole year. Right. So if the client tell us like, okay, we are expecting like 5,000 users take this training over this year, we normally project that cost according to what we know the AI expenses are, and most clients pay that upfront. Otherwise, we can build, monthly in a monthly basis for that cost. But we have instances for each of our clients. So I hope that helps. And I have to say that something good is that the cost of the tokens have been going down a lot because there is a lot of competition. So at the beginning, the cost was super high. Now that not that much. So we are looking always for the better option. And it depends on the clients. A couple of clients actually had models inside the organization that they were already using in an enterprise model. So we were able to actually tap on those from behind the scenes.
Perfect. Thank you. And I see a whole bunch of questions coming in. I'm happy to respond to this one. I'm just working backwards from what I'm seeing in the chat here. So what happens if clients do not have VR headsets? Can the experience be deployed on a computer? So absolutely, we would connect with you to really understand what are the devices that your learners are using and your audience are accessing their content from. So this can be VR headset, it could be desktop, it could be tablet, it could be mobile phone. So we would design for those specific devices. In the context of some of the simulations and games that we showed you today, some of those were built using WebXR technology, which means that they can be accessed on either a VR headset or a desktop computer or other device. So really, we're designing one experience that gives you the optionality in terms of how you access it, which is really powerful because not all organizations are, investing in VR headsets. But sometimes a learner might have a headset and might want the option for that more immersive experience. But otherwise, absolutely, we understand that large global organizations need to be able to scale their content in order for these investments to make sense. And so we would certainly design for the devices that are most widely used within an organization. All right.
And I have to say that also, we're showing some examples that are 3D because most of the examples came from the XR team. But again, most of all of these ideas and framework can be applied to any other type of interaction too, right? So it is not like we need this to be a super interactive 3D space to use the octalysis and or consider all of these items. Uh, it can be applied to any type of interaction.
Perfect. All right, just looking through some other questions here. There's an interesting question around how AI is disrupting professional talent and leadership development. And I think the answer is AI is disrupting all areas, all content areas and all functions. So it's so interesting to see how the world of leadership development and professional talent and L&D experiences related to those topic areas are evolving. And so I think through some of the experiences we showed you today, just creating those kinds of simulations or gamified experiences where you can put someone in the shoes of, in the context of these situations and have them actually practice a leadership conversation or a coaching moment or a hiring interview. We can put them inside of these situations and allow them to practice having these conversations. We can do that by giving them, first of all, we can voice enable it. So no multiple choice prompts or canned responses, but people can really just interact with avatars in the way that they would in the real world. And then we give them AI powered feedback that is very specific to an organization's content and frameworks. So for example, if you're using the Grow coaching framework or another methodology, we can really customize the AI feedback that learners get based on your approved frameworks. And then lastly, when it comes to more gamified features, a lot of that depends on your corporate culture, but we could certainly add, in some coaching experiences that we have, we've added a meter, an engagement meter, where you can immediately see how well the conversation is going. Is the person happy with your response, or are they starting to get a little bit agitated with how you're responding? So we can add in these visual meters. And then, of course, you can gamify it even further with points and so forth. So really, those are design decisions that we would make together as part of what is your corporate culture, what kinds of features would resonate with your learners and so forth. But going back to the topic of AI, certainly it's allowing us to simulate the end-to-end process and giving people opportunities to put their skills to the test. Esteban, is there anything you would add in that realm?
Well, I believe that something that is related, a question that is related to that one is this one from Chet. Is SweetRush, as SweetRush looks at the next 3 to 5 years, what are the common pain points your other clients will need to address concerning talent, leadership, and development? For me, this is super related to AI. And something that we have been discussing internally a lot is the fact that AI is taking away some of the tasks that are more entry level, right? So something that is concerning for us and for some of our clients is as, entry level positions disappear because that's something that the AI can take over. How do you create actually the senior positions? Because normally you start an entry position and you learn your way to a senior position, or at least to a senior or to a position where you are really productive in the organization. But what is it that is going to happen if the entry level positions are taken by AI? So we have been discussing a lot about the fact that the organizations need to start building what we have been calling in different ways. Sometimes it's artificial work. I have heard that term, or other terms, where we actually need to build a simulated workplace for entry level that allows them to go through that and actually start like in an upper level that wasn't the case before, right? So when people start in the organization, they need to jump a little bit forward than what it was before. And that's a challenge for organizations, right? Because we are probably in the next years, we are not going to be building the level entry positions anymore, and that will affect senior positions later on. So for me, that's the main preoccupation, the main concern, a new concern that I have heard from our clients.
Mm.
And we are trying to figure out how to create these interactions and these simulations to allow, uh, you know, entry level to actually jump to a more senior level right away, instead of going through the regular process, because that's not going to be the normal thing moving forward.
Mm-hmm. And then another really interesting question here that I love is how is SweetRush building talent development solutions for the next generation of workers, so age 22 to 29? Um, so for these kinds of experiences, we don't just look to the L&D industry for inspiration. At SweetRush, we really believe in looking at the world around us. So what are marketing agencies doing? What is my younger teenage sister, what kinds of apps is she looking at? Things like Duolingo, or what games are my kids playing? So looking at the world around us for inspiration to really gain insight into what the next generation is doing and how they're consuming content, and then bringing that into our game design and solution design. So, for example, are we building a TikTok style game? Are we building a short form humor-filled video that really captures attention? Because, once you've captured a learner's attention, that's really half the battle won. We want to grab their attention. We want them to hear the message that we're trying to communicate to them. And we want them to remember it. So how can we pique their curiosity, whether it's through social learning moments like the card game that we showed, or short form video? I know humor is something that we're doing more and more of now. So how can we combine AI generated content and avatars with more of a humor focused story, for example? So I guess my advice there would be to look at the world around you and to create learning that mirrors that, rather than just looking inwards to the L&D industry sometimes. Then there's a question here. I wonder if you might want to take it, Esteban, but do we classify simulation-based learning as a form of gamification? Oh, you're on mute.
Yes, actually, just pasted that because it was at the top,
Okay.
and the reality is like, yes, if we use the Talis framework to measure that, a lot of simulations can be a form of gamification. Obviously, it depends on the simulation. If you are simulating at a spreadsheet, probably not that much. But depending on what you're simulating, in a lot of cases, you can add elements that are gamified.
Yeah. All right, let's see if there are any others here that we might have missed.
Well, here's an interesting one from Charlie. Is how do you determine when gamification is the right solution, and how do you validate that it is changing on job behavior and not just increasing participation? And I am going to refer mainly to the second part of the question. That is, how do we measure that is changing behavior? And the reality is that this is not something that we as a learning company can do or on our own. Now, we can generate a lot of analytics inside the experiences to measure behavior within the experiences we create. But one of the clients that yeah, I was thinking that how can I say the name without saying the name, but no, I couldn't. But one of of our clients did something that I believe every company should do. That is creating, approaching this as an investigation, because they had certain number of incidents, of security incidents, and they created two groups. And in one, they received the regular training with a PDF file about, what's a procedure and how to prevent security issues. And the other group received uh, um, training using one of our experiences. And then In the next couple of months, they measure performance on those two teams, right, inside the work environment, right? So that was the first time that I saw someone taking the time to do that level of investigation in the company to prove or disprove if this was the correct way of teaching for this organization. And the results were really good because it proved that the group that took the experience that we built for them reduced the number of incidents in a lot compared to the group that just received the regular training, right? But again, we need the companies that are providing the training to figure out how is it that they can measure it inside, because we can just measure whatever happens inside the experiences. We don't have access to what the actual workers are doing inside their jobs.
Mm-hmm. And so that starts with a very intentional analysis phase. So again, starting by identifying what is the gap that we're trying to solve, what are the goals we're trying to achieve, and mapping that to actual ways that we can measure success so that we can really push the needle as we're building the experience. What are the analytics that we need to pull out of the experience itself? And then, as Esteban shared, those focus groups in a way. So comparing, how some people learn versus another group who's maybe using some more traditional methods. But I know that that's not always the case when we're all going a million miles an hour and working on so many different projects, and we just need to get content in front of users. But that is a very intentional way of doing it, a small pilot and testing out the results. All right. Let's see. I think with 2 minutes left here, I know that we are going to be sharing a handout with the framework today. So I know we did present quite a bit of theory there in the beginning. So if you're like me and we're trying to furiously take notes, rest assured we will share the handout with you. And then we just encourage you to please reach out and connect with us. We love these kinds of conversations, and this is really the fun part of our jobs, where we get to brainstorm and be creative and conceptual, and how we can turn sometimes more static content into something that is really highly engaging and impactful for your learners. So yeah, thank you for sharing your time
Oh,
with us today.
thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. It's been a pleasure. Stay in touch. Have a great afternoon, morning.